So welcome to today's meeting of the Community Planning Aberdeen Board. I was going to make a suggestion because we've got quite a full agenda today, and with your agreement, I would like to take a number of items together. We have 16 project end reports, which is absolutely fantastic that that's happening. But obviously that does put a little bit of time pressure on us. Now, I've suggested that we take 3.2, 3.3, 3.4 together. We would take 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 and 3.8 together, and 3.9, 10 and 11 together, and 12, 13, 14 and 15 together, and 16 and 17 together. Can we agree if that's an acceptable way to move forward? I'm seeing nodding heads, so I take it no one's suggesting otherwise. Councillor MacDonald, thanks.
Just to make the comment, Chair, that there is a lot in here. There has been so much work gone into this that I do hope we as a committee can do justice, given the time, as you say. So if it doesn't work, I suggest we maybe revisit coming back and looking at some of the projects.
Completely agree. I was going to suggest in the event that we have a similar situation, I'll maybe have a conversation offline with officers about perhaps fitting in an extra meeting or something of that order, because there is a tremendous amount of work, as Councillor MacDonald says, that have gone into these reports. They really are good news stories that we should be celebrating. And, to do them justice, I think, that's a very valid point. So with that in mind, can I hand over to Gogo to do the apologies, please?
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, board members. We've got 4 apologies from Duncan Cockburn, Peter Edwards, Caroline Hicks-Cox, Matt Lockley, and we've got William Hardy substituting for Duncan Cockburn. Please note that the public section of this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their camera and mute their microphone when not speaking? The camera and the microphone should be switched on when you are invited to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function on the Teams toolbar. I will now ask members participating today to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced, so that this is clear in the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded for the minutes. Chair?
Present.
Vice Chair?
Present.
Councillor Craig?
Present.
Councillor MacDonald?
Present.
Councillor Radley?
Present.
Councillor Cook? Gail Beattie? Alistair Robertson? Chair Ewan?
Present.
Yvonne Boyd? Angela Scott? Susan Elston? Paul O'Connell?
Present.
Jonathan Smith? Richard McCullen?
Present.
Susan Webb? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on from there, we have, has anyone got any declarations of interest or transparency statements? I have Paul O'Connor. Paul?
It's under 4.1 the agenda, page 232 for the budget via my role of VACFO, but I'll remain in the meeting.
Not seeing any other hands. So moving on from that, we have item 1.1, the CPA board minute of the 15th of February 2023 for our approval. Has anybody got any points to raise about the minute? I'm not seeing any hands. Can we agree? Thank you very much. Item 1.2, the draft CPA management group minute of the 22nd of March 2023 for our information. It's on pages 21 to 38. Any questions? Okay. Item 1.3, CPA Board Forward Planner, pages 39 to 42. Any questions? Not seeing any hands. And that then takes us to 1.4, the national update. And I think we've got Mr. McCallum online to take us through that. Thank you. Mr. McCallum.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose just being mindful of your opening comments about the busyness of the agenda, I'm wondering if I can give some time back. I was going to pick up on the policy prospectus that was launched yesterday, and also just say a word on community wealth building and also the energy strategy, but just conscious of time, and I've not had any direct questions from the board in advance, whether it'd be helpful just to circulate a note after the meeting and give a few minutes back at least to you.
I'm perfectly happy to hear from you, Mr. McCallum, but I'm looking around the room. I'm seeing nodding heads, so I think it would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll just say a few things then. So just on the policy prospectus that was launched yesterday, so the First Minister built those themes, particularly around equality, opportunity, and community. And I think if members of the board have time, at least have a quick skim over the document. It's not a long document and well worth just seeing the priorities of the new First Minister and indeed the new cabinet. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 things that were of particular relevance. There was a restatement of the commitment by both the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister in relation to a new deal for local government, and clearly that will be a key thing in terms of work that's ongoing over the next number of months. But the role there of not just COSLA but local authorities across Scotland is going to be key in terms of inputting into that. The other thing, quite substantial thing, maybe of direct relevance, was a kind of signal in relation to the National Care Service of a delay beyond the summer recess for the bringing of the Stage 1 bill to Parliament. And Ms Todd, who is the new minister with responsibility for the National Care Service, indicating a desire for a bit more time to understand and work through some of the concerns that have been raised by trade unions, local authorities, and others in relation to the bill so far. So I think a sense of wanting to build up a greater degree of consensus before the Stage 1 bill comes forward. And I know that the board put a response back previously in relation to the consultation, and while some of the detail in terms of that further engagement will be set out in due course, I think an opportunity to engage further there. And the final thing was just to highlight the kind of commitment in the prospectus around the homelessness and prevention strategy group, and indeed the funding associated with the Ending Homelessness Together fund. And again, I know there's work has gone on in the city in relation to that, so a commitment around that investment as well. The other 2 things that I wanted to just highlight: the community wealth building strategy is under development, and the legislation for that was launched at the end of January. There is the opportunity to feed back on the legislation by the 25th of April, so just next Tuesday. But if there is any questions or further asks on the community wealth building approach to economic development, I'm very happy to pick that up. And as I said, I just wanted to say a word on the draft energy and just transition plan. And again, the strategy was launched a couple of months back, and the consultation period is open until the 9th of May. And I know that there's been some positive engagement in the city in terms of some of the public engagement and that the build team has had in relation to the strategy, and that progresses, and work will continue on that beyond the consultation period closing on the 9th of May. So that was all from me, Chair. Happy to take any questions, and yeah, thanks for the time.
Thank you very much for that. Questions for Mr. McCallum? I'm looking around the room and there are no hands. You have got off very lightly, Mr. McCallum, given all the things that are happening. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Moving on then, that takes us to item 2.1, the Children's Services Plan for 2023 to 2026. Ms. Shepherd, do you want to introduce it and then take some questions? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, with pleasure. So the report and the plan, I think, outlines the approach that we have taken to develop this statutory plan, which sits equally across the Health Board and the local authority, but has involved a wide number of partners in a period of fairly intensive analysis of data to almost try and pull out the themes that we feel we need to address to improve outcomes for children, young people and families. Just for everyone's awareness, we began this process, I remember it well, the 11th of November, and concluded the process in around March time after 2 periods of consultation, one that we classed as engagement around some of the key themes that were coming through to check we were looking in the right places, and then a more formal period of consultation to make sure we were able to go out to those we serve to check that the plan was broadly in alignment where they thought it should be going. And we have a plan as a result of that fairly comprehensive approach, which I believe is firmly based on what the data is telling us. I guess one word of warning that any plan is only as good as it is until the day it is finalised, and that data comes through and is emerging all the time. So the Children's Services Board has given particular consideration to how we keep an eye on the data coming through to make sure that we can continue to be agile in our response, because we're conscious that with the cost of living crisis, with us coming through the pandemic, things are still shifting. Hopefully of some assurance is that around 40% of the actions are very much tailored towards a preventative approach. Around 50% are what we would call early intervention, and then a smaller proportion in that specialist category. We've worked really hard as a board to try and align this plan, try and pull together the very many statutory plans that we need to develop for children. We felt it was really important to do that to make sure that we make the best use of all of our time and also aid the reporting process for the many different statutory plans. So I feel we've done that fairly well. You'll see within the paper today, we're looking for the board's endorsement of the plan and looking to amend the children's section of the LOIP to reflect this Children's Services Plan, given that it's based on updated analysis of what's coming through about children and families. We've tried to give careful consideration to the timing of charters. I'm conscious that sometimes our charters were a bit late previously, so we've tried to spread that work over the 3 years to make sure that we can keep to the timescales that we're proposing. There is a change in terms of the stretch outcomes. Children with disabilities and additional support needs has particularly come through our analysis, so we are proposing a stretch outcome around that group. And we're also proposing to almost mainstream children's rights through the entire plan, rather than have it as a separate and distinct stretch outcome.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for you and your team's report. I think it's an excellent paper. It's a long read with all the appendices, but it actually is absolutely key, and I really do appreciate the work it's gone into it. So questions for Ms. Shepherd, please. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the report. Can I just get a sense, perhaps, because I haven't read every single word in it, I have to say, unlike my colleague Councillor Nicholl. But I did have a look, and I just wanted to get a sense. Perhaps you've mentioned the changes. Would it be fair to say that it is based on what was there before and is carrying on with good work and good practice and programs and plans that were already in place? Ms. Shep, through you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, to a degree. I think, however, when we look at the impact of the last few years on children and families, there's a need for us to really think about poverty across all the different work streams. That was really quite almost sat separately to the plan previously, and I think that was unhelpful. I think when we look at the commitments that we've made within the promise, it's important again to have the promise reflected across all of those different pieces of work as well. I think some of the action that we took over the course of the pandemic, for example, I think we all worked really hard to make sure information was available to children and families, so to an extent they could find that information for themselves. As a result of all of that goodwill, we've actually made it a bit confusing now in terms of where to find some of the information. So broadly, yes. But with a real keen focus on poverty, on the promise, and also on those children with disabilities and with additional support needs. Some things do look to have shifted slightly, so we've tried to pick that up and reflect that within the plan as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful and does reflect what I anecdotally perhaps thought myself with what's happening, because there is still a real an ongoing issue around children in poverty in this city, as there is across the country.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this report. I think that having the rights of young people right at the heart of everything is so important. That is such a crucial guide to ensure that we're doing our best to look after the well-being of all young people, of all children and young people, looking after their educational and their care issues, and providing them with the maximum opportunities that are possible right at the start of their life. I think that's crucial. So for that reason, it's particularly welcome to see this as a partnership document. I think that that's a real strength of what we're doing here in the city, is that there's been so much collaboration with the NHS, with police, fire, with the universities. It really is a cooperative document. We're all looking at these issues as shared projects. We're sharing data. That's crucial. And we're providing wraparound care for young people in their individual school settings. So I mean, so the question is really to ask what, how do we develop this journey? Because I mean, it seems that we're moving on quite efficiently. The challenges, the social and the emotional challenges that we have for young people are huge, and they're growing. So kind of continuing that journey, because it's important that we're not complacent as we at this very positive time.
Through you, Chair. I absolutely agree. I think relationships are absolutely key to that. I think we're very, very fortunate across community planning partnership in the quality of relationships that we have with partners. I think we're able to have really honest, candid conversations with each other. And we are maybe a little bit further on in terms of recognising our interdependency and codependency. I think when you've got that absolute trust and honesty, it's quite easy to get through to the nub of the challenge and start looking at potential solutions potentially more quickly. We've also worked quite hard as a Children's Services Board to try and streamline our process in terms of collecting that ongoing picture to make sure that we are more accurately able to report and also reflect on the work that we're doing to make sure that it continues to remain current. Again, I would say that is because of the quality of the relationships that we have across the partnerships, where I feel very blessed actually to work with the folk on the board to take this forward.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions? in that case, I'll come in with one. I did note what you said at the beginning, Ms. Shepherd, about the flexibility needed over the next 3 years. And I think we've heard quite a lot in recent times about the impact that COVID et al. Has had on us all, but in particular young children. It's obviously been a very difficult time for them. And I think in other papers, we're seeing spikes that we wouldn't really want to see normally, that may be attributable to the COVID pandemic. Do you think this revised plan will actually show us some of the recovery, some of the good news that will hopefully come out of that as we go forward? Because we obviously have a chance to reflect on what was happening during those years, but are we getting it right in terms of moving out of COVID and back into a more normal world?
Thank you. Probably 3 bits to pick up on that. So I've spent some of the last couple of weeks actually looking at our most recent health and wellbeing survey data. And that will be taken through both committee and it'll be made available across community planning partnership as well. There is clear evidence of improvement from the first survey, which was undertaken 6 months ago, which is really encouraging. There's also evidence across a number of the measures that we're performing better than national, which again is a really good news story. There are, however, some things within that we need to pay attention to. So I think there is evidence, yes, but there's always something to learn. One of the key pieces of work that I think will give us that really agile picture of how the system is responding to need is the work that Shona Milne, our Chief Education Officer, is leading around requests for assistance. Many of you will be aware we've had a system in place which has been quite restricted in terms of the number of partners who are engaging with that. We're looking to spread that actually across the entire community planning partnership. What that will do is give us a live picture of vulnerability and the extent to which we're addressing that vulnerability. I think that really helps us transform our working practices to make sure that we are impactful in approach. So I think that's a really key one. Around the monitoring of data, I think that is critical. I think through our process of developing the plan, we became very, very aware of the interdependency between different data sets, some of which are single agency, some of which are multi-agency. We've actually got a mechanism in place at every board meeting to keep collecting that data and keeping an eye on it. So if there are peaks that are maybe unexpected, but really good news, we've got an opportunity to flag those up. And similarly, if something isn't going in the direction we would be wanting it to go in, we actually know that we need to pay attention to that. So I think we've been quite robust in our systems for monitoring to make sure, because we're absolutely aware, as you said, the data is shifting all the time. And we need to have that live, accurate, up-to-date picture in terms of where things are at.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm looking around the room. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any hands. The recommendations are contained on pages 49 and 50. There are 5 of them. We're asked to approve the plan, obviously, approve the proposed amendment to Children and Young People Stretch Outcomes 4 to 9 on the Local Outcome Improvement Plan 2016-2026. And we're also asked to note the table in Appendix 6 detailing proposed amendments and to approve the proposed draft scheduling of the project charters under Stretch Outcomes 4 to 9 for submission to the board, and agree the next steps as outlined in Section 5. Can we agree all of that, please? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on, item 3.1, the CPA Improvement Programme Quarterly Update. Ms. Swanson, do you want to take us through that and take questions, please?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the overview report that you have before you, overall, we now have 28 aims that have been achieved, with 13 project reports ended. We have 16 further project end reports on today's agenda, as mentioned by you earlier. In respect of the aims to be achieved by 2022, we had 20 improvement aims to be achieved. 13 of those have been achieved, and you have 9 project end reports in respect of those on today's agenda. Therefore, after today, all 2022 aims, with the exception of 3 which are based on the financial year, will have submitted their project end reports for your consideration. In respect of 2023, at present we have 15 aims achieved with 5 project ends approved and 7 further on today's agenda. The remaining 2023 project aims are currently scheduling their project end reports for submission, and that's reported at Appendix 1. At the last meeting of the management group, they discussed the status of all of the projects, and any issues impacting them progressing were picked up with the chairs of the respective outcome improvement groups having scheduled meetings with the project managers to discuss any areas where specific projects were struggling to progress. And again, that is detailed at Appendix 1 of the paper, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Questions for Mrs. Swanson? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, we have a number of recommendations at page 54. Can we agree those recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. That then takes us on to the project end report grouping. Now, as we agreed at the beginning, if we can take 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4 together, you know, I do realise that we are truncating this a little bit, and I apologise for that, but I think if we go through them each individually, it'll possibly be quite a lengthy process. So if there are any additional questions, you know, please feel free to submit them to officers. I think, Mrs. Carrington, you're going to take us through the first 3 papers.
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much, Chair. I have slightly different numbers that I'm taking forward at the moment. I have 2.3, 3.1 and 3.2. Can I just confirm that those are the right ones?
Yes, that's the project report numbers, and I've got them as I've introduced them as numbers on the paper on the agenda. So that's absolutely correct. Yes,
that's fine. That's my confusion there. I did have a little bit of a heart attack. So thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity. So as you said, Aberdeen Prospers is leading on 3 projects that have their end reports coming on the agenda today, and they support the delivery of both outcomes, stretch outcomes 2 and 3. The first one, 2.3, is supporting 15 care experienced young people into employment via public sector employability programmes by 2023. I've worked with RightWorks to provide individual support through employability pipeline for this project. They've expanded the Aberdeen City Council Guaranteed Interview Scheme to include care experienced young people. And linked with the Kickstart programme, provided funding to support young people who needed it to enhance, and also enhanced communication of the support available. These activities together have led to 63 young people accessing the support offered, and 15 of those moving into employment, which would meet the stretch outcome that we've aimed for. The remaining, a further 3 have accessed higher education, and another 8 have moved into training. The remaining people on the programme continue to receive reports. It has to be noted here, there were many more individuals that actually engaged with the programme, but there's no legal requirement to divulge further your care experience. So it's not possible to say with any certainty how many more might have been falling under the category of the programme at that time. It has to be noted at this point that external funding streams are not guaranteed. However, moving forward, where possible, the above changes, such as the Guaranteed Interview Scheme, have been incorporated into business as usual, and the identification of care experienced young people as a target group will remain a focus of the LOIP going forward. Regarding the second project here, 3.1, and my numbering, increasing the number of responsible businesses working with Community Planning Aberdeen through community benefits and corporate social responsibility activity. We've actually got a very engaged business community. We're quite lucky. We've been working with them to align their corporate and social responsibility efforts with the local outcome improvement plan. Working closely with business in the community, we've launched the Responsible Business Community Planning Aberdeen website. And in 2020, we ran the first responsible business event, which has since been delivered annually. And that promotes opportunities for businesses to support Deloitte and the projects within it, share good practice and allow networking between businesses and sectors. We've also made changes to the Community Benefits Plan, part of tender documentation, to include stronger engagement with communities during community benefit delivery. And since the start of the project in September 2021, we've seen a 200% increase in the number of responsible business partners and now have 27 businesses contributing to the aims of Deloitte. The impact of this is widespread, from offering work placement, apprenticeships, engagement and employability events, to taking measures to achieve net zero. And this work is now also included in business as usual, and will continue to maximise the delivery of community benefits through this project, track the number of businesses that are working in partnership with the Community Planning Aberdeen. The third one, regarding increasing by 10% the number of people in Aberdeen who have digital access and feeling comfortable using digital tools. This project was a little bit harder to measure, so it's quite subjective, since feeling comfortable using different tools could mean different things to different people. And much of the data relating to comfort around the digital skills is taken from the City Voice questionnaire, which it should be recognised isn't representative necessarily of the city in terms of the age demographic across the city. That said, that report did highlight that between 2018 and 2022, there was an increase of 9.4% in those respondents who reported having basic digital skills. And there was also a 17% increase reported in respondents who own or have easy access to a smartphone, one of the preferred ways to access digital connectivity. However, although it's not reflected in the City Voice questionnaire, through the 43 different projects across the city which were involved in Connecting Scotland initiative, supporting distribution of iPads and Chromebooks across the city, a total of 1,697 digital devices were issued to city residents between March 2020 and March 2021, and this vastly increased the number of individuals with digital access. In addition to that, 1,798 people or households received MiFi devices, ensuring that an additional 1,798 households had Wi-Fi access during that time. These devices were issued to individuals who were shielding due to COVID, families, looked after children and young people, and the elderly, as well as to individuals who were unemployed or who were on low incomes and might not otherwise have been able to afford them themselves. North East Sensory Services also took part in the Connecting Scotland initiative, which has enabled their digital project staff and volunteers to complete digital champion training free of charge, and with a number also accessing digital inclusion qualifications to take them that little bit further in their training. So this LIFE project recognised that there were already several organisations providing access to digital services and providing digital classes, and it didn't want to duplicate any of this activity. So it instead focused on raising awareness of these existing offers and developing tests where provision was not readily available. And this work is also now being incorporated into business as usual. The Digital City or the City Digital Group will continue to meet and promote current and new digital learning opportunities. They'll share best practice and identify any projects where collaborative working would be of benefit. Data will also be monitored going forward to ensure that performance here continues. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen and point out that hopefully, I can't see them from here, the individual project leads are with us today to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Questions? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much. I do have a question around on the first project that we looked at around the recommendations at number 3, and that's about the funding, Chair, and we can maybe come on to that because it is a concern. I think that it's mentioned in the report that it's around £6,000 per person to get funding, and so we're talking in the region of this project, presumably around about 100,000 for the 15 that had come through, although we also know of all the other the other wraparound stuff that happened. So it was really when we come to that, maybe look at that. My other question is around the second project around community benefits and CSR. And I just wondered, how do we celebrate, or is there a mechanism where either on the company side or or on the people involved in those projects, and just looking at the photos and so on. Is there another way that we can somehow celebrate this particular one? Because I think this really is widening out again the community planning reach, where private companies are getting involved, and I know there will be lots more data, I'm sure, around, for example, companies who do maybe promote adoption and fostering, and then hopefully that comes through as actually people taking up the opportunities in the companies. And I don't know if there's anecdotal data or if there's hard data on that, but it's really just trying to not even to understand, but to celebrate what we're seeing in front of us in that report. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Who wants to go first?
Thank you. I'm the project lead for that project, so I'll try and answer that for you. In terms of celebration, do you mean like celebration of the businesses that are getting involved and a way to promote what they're doing?
It could be either. I was particularly thinking that across the city at sometimes there are big awards that go on, and there are companies that are awarded for this type of work that they do. But it was also from the other side about how we share good practice that companies have done, and how those individuals who have benefited from maybe going into I think there was one there where they, the apprenticeships and so on, and then to how they can then celebrate their involvement in that, and how they can spread the word about how good it is to have done it.
Thanks. Yeah, so one method that we're using to celebrate business involvement just now is through our social media profiles and our website. So that's one sort of process that we share, and it's sort of it networks the businesses together, and it offers them to share what they're doing. Our annual responsible business event as well offers businesses the chance to speak at the event and share what they're doing, and also other organizations, partnerships can speak at the event too, and share successes throughout the year. In terms of individuals that are benefiting from business engagement, we work in partnership with ABZ Works and other organisations which share case studies from clients that have benefited from work experience placements and apprenticeships and such.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Ms. Taylor would like to come in, and maybe Michelle as well. Thanks.
I was just going to really add to what Charlotte had said there, that although we've achieved our aim for this project, we recognise that we want to continue to deepen those relationships, and also recognise some of the other businesses that are involved with us, maybe not receiving that title of responsible business partner due to the nature of our relationship at the moment, but we've got about 191 businesses that are working with us in some capacity, engaging with that annual event that Charlotte spoke about. One of the ideas that the project team will continue to look at going forward is around accreditation. So we've had this idea of, can we give a sort of badge to those businesses that we recognise are going above and beyond? So there have been discussions around what the criteria for that would look like in different levels. So that would be another way of that official recognition that they are responsible business partners. But I think that's what the project team will continue to explore. Even though we've achieved that aim, there's scope for much more improvement around that.
Thank you. And Mrs. Taylor, do you want to come back in as well? Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a wonky microphone. On the funding question, so it's an average of about £6,000 per person. Now, some individuals receiving employability support just need the quickest, lightest touch, and they move on. Others need much longer term, much more intensive support. So it's really the person-centred approach that we take. So take the Kickstart scheme, for example, that was funded by DWP. It paid national minimum wage based on the age of the individual to provide 6 months paid employment. So for a 16-year-old, for example, of whom we had very few on Kickstart, that was something like £4 an hour. For those within the authority, we topped it up to the council's lowest pay using the Young Person Guarantee Fund. So obviously for them, it was a much higher investment. There's a young lassie I mentioned who got some seed funding. That came in at less than £2,000. So it's wildly variable. The funding that we do have is currently annual. Young person guarantee funding is gone. No One Left Behind funding continues, and that's an all-age, all-stage employability programme. That's what's enabling us to continue meantime. And of course, our care experience young people are a priority for the local employability partnership, which reports to Aberdeen Prospers, and obviously up here because we're here today. It's also one of the many eligibility criteria for No One Left Behind activity.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregg?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the responsible business events. There's a graph that shows the impact going down, which is not the direction we would surely see. And I just wondered if we could have some explanation as to that. We want to see, increase in contacts being made, more people being made aware, and more outcomes happening. So what's the story behind that?
Thank you for the question. So with the responsible business events, the first couple that we did were online. So we engaged quite a large number due to the hybrid nature. And our last one was in person, which I think we've learned from that we will try and make it more hybrid. We do recognise that in-person events are much stronger for networking and creating long-lasting relationships. However, we also recognise from the numbers that it may suit more to also provide the option for it to be streamed or something. In terms of following on from the events, there was a drop this year in connections that were like instant recruitment of businesses to the network. However, I did sort of state that those relationships that come from the responsible business events, they take our time to nurture, and it may not be instant that a business joins the responsible business network following the event. It takes us then creating the relationship with them, and then for them to then engage with the partnerships to provide support.
Thanks. Thanks. That's really helpful. I mean, I know how difficult it is generally to measure impact, so I appreciate that. I was just wondering if there was a longer term plan to try and boost these events. Are they going to be hybrid or in person or?
In terms of the next event, we've planned it for this year already, and we aim to have it a hybrid event.
Right.
So we're looking into options for that just now. We also are working closely with business in the community who have quarterly events. So we're wanting to take a more joint approach with them moving forward as well. So we're showing a presence at the events too, to make sure that businesses that do attend those events are connecting with us.
Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions? Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, Chair. Under the 3.2, the project end for digital access, MiFi and computers, is there any plans to get funding to continue this? Because I've seen in the grassroots in the communities the difference that does make when people through the cost of living crisis, through COVID, really have struggled for internet access, both for social, but also for finding work. So if that was possible and there's anything in the pipeline, it'd be really good to know.
Mrs. Stewart, can you help us with that?
Yes. I think from this project, we've kind of recognised the need for better quality Wi-Fi within a number of our community centres, and we were looking at where we can source funding to upgrade what's available for people, so people can come in and access that. And we're also I suppose there's a number of projects that are continuing as well. But yeah, we definitely looking at improving the Wi-Fi infrastructure across our community centres and libraries. And we have got funding for some of our libraries to be upgraded at the moment.
Sorry, thank you for that. It's really important because a lot of the way people access, if they don't have one at home, is in your libraries and your community centres. But it was more in terms of providing the laptops and the Wi-Fi at home. I can't emphasise the difference it made It was tremendous, a really good piece of work that you've done there. So is there funding maybe either currently or on something you're hoping to do in the future to provide more equipment for people at home?
I will absolutely be looking for opportunities for that, because I think the Connecting Scotland, as you mentioned, was just an absolutely amazing initiative, absolutely timely as well, at a point where the need to connect digitally was exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. So really, I suppose, whether we have opportunities on that scale, but absolutely on the lookout to look at opportunities. And we have our City Digital group that we're continuing with, who, and again, across the different partners, we will seek to, as opportunities present, we'll absolutely go for them.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Councillor MacDonald.
I was going to say, it was good to see in the recommendations around the responsible companies that we're going to extend that to the third sector and so on, because I think that would be something to really look at, and that's good to see. I won't say too much about libraries, but I do think we do, we've got a review coming up in the council around it, but I think it's absolutely key that if, as a city and a community, that we are going to move towards having more on digital, on websites, on computers, that we do have to be mindful of how people there access it. And whilst I agree that it can be in the home, there are many now who are not able to do that because the ongoing costs of having broadband in the home are just too prohibitive. And whilst having the kit is one thing, but being able year on year to be able to use it is a struggle. So that we really do, not just in our community centres and our libraries, but in other spaces, if we're moving to that as a city, which I think, as a city we are, then we have to have those in place, and to take those, particularly those elderly, who just do not have the will sometimes, or the capacity to even learn how to do some of the stuff. But there are others who are absolutely brilliant at it, and we've seen, Silver Surfers and all the rest of it in that as well. And as we have some very good examples as well of intergenerational, where young people help their elderly neighbours and family members to access digital. It is something that I know we're mindful of, but we have to be increasingly mindful of as we go forward.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Shepherd?
Thank you. Just what might give you some reassurance, some work that's being driven in response to what's referred to as Logan Report, Mark Logan's report on essentially how well placed we are as a country to respond to digital. We have been working really, really closely with further and higher education partners. We have established what we're calling Aberdeen Computing Collaborative. It offers a huge amount of opportunity in terms of really exploiting some of that potential for intergenerational work to make sure that our children and young people, and indeed parents and carers and everyone else in communities, has the level of digital skill that we would want for them all. So our report is going through Education Children's Services on that collaborative. More than happy to make that available if that would be helpful. The other bit just to flag up is that there was a policy intention around a digital device for all children and young people nationally. Awaiting further information on that, but that potentially is in the pipeline. Again, hopefully of some reassurance. You may remember that during the pandemic, we actually responded at pace to getting the Chromebooks out there. I remember it well. So I think actually compared to others, we're pretty well placed. But again, happy to keep members of the board informed of developments in that area.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions? I have one, and it's really going back to our partners, and it kind of links in a little bit to 11.2 that we're going to come to with volunteering, but I was going to ask it now. Are we managing to get out and engage with business groups? Because obviously in the city centre, for example, there are a number of business groups that come together. We have the Chamber, but we also have, you know, the George Street traders that come together as an entity. We have West End traders come together as an entity. Are we managing to get out and actually maybe target some of these groups to see if we can entice them or in some way bring them into our scheme, and try and make them aware, because there's so much going on in the business world that some of this might just be passing them by, and they would be interested in joining, but perhaps there's just too many other things ongoing at the moment in these rather hectic times.
Yeah, so this is something as well that we've discussed as a working group moving forward. We've had conversations with the likes of the Chamber. We share promotions of our events through their bulletin, and also we've recently connected with the Aberdeen Business Network, and we're trying to sort of negotiate getting into some of their meetings to meet the businesses that attend those. But it's something definitely that we would like to continue pushing for and making sure that we are engaging with as many groups as possible in Aberdeen.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Any further questions for officers on these three papers? I'm not seeing any hands and I'm not seeing anything on the board. In that case, we have recommendations for the Project N 2.3 at page 83, for Project N 3.1 at page 91, and for Project N 3.2 at page 100. Can we agree those recommendations? Oh, Councillor MacDonald, you put your hand up.
Yeah, it was just on page 83, and it was quite reassuring to get the answer around the funding of that project. But when it says note that long-term employability support is required in the majority of cases, which I don't disagree with, I just wondered if there was any action that we could put in that, just to say that and it's maybe implicit that that we will be actively trying to support by helping individuals to look for funding. But it's maybe implicit in that, and I don't need to change the recommendation.
Not at all. I think that's a very good point. Do you want to come back with that, Mrs. Taylor? Thanks.
I can, thank you. We don't, so aside from the seed fund, we don't give funding to individuals. We commission services or we deliver activity in-house. So we don't distribute funding to the individual people. Now, there are other agencies such as Prince's Trust, for example, which runs business startup activity, and with that there comes some seed funds. Sometimes we can link together, we can point them in that direction. The Department for Work and Pensions, obviously that provides some funding for training as well. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this. I think other than just to say really that while the funding follows the individual, it doesn't land in the pockets of the individual.
Yeah, that's not really what I meant, but I mean, I think it's probably covered off. I think it probably is the case that when you're working with them, that you do point them and signpost them to all these possible opportunities, and that's really what I wanted, so that we do move forward rather than just tick a box for the exercise.
Are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can we agree those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. In that case, if we could then move to the next group, which is the papers at 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 and 3.8. And if I could ask Mrs. Shepherd to maybe give us a brief intro through each and to take any questions to begin with. Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, I guess I would like to apologise for the number of papers you have from the Children's Services Board. As we spoke about briefly before, there's been a bit of refocusing with the new plan. So some of these areas of improvement are ongoing, but have been slightly re-steered based on what the current data is telling us. Around 4.1, you'll note that we had an ambition to reduce the number of births affected by drugs, and I think the report shows that this is a complex situation, but actually that aim has been realised, in fact surpassed. We do recognise, however, that we need to keep an eye on that data really closely, and you'll see from the paper that both the ADP and the Best Start in Life group will monitor that data in case we need to step in and take action again. Around 4.3, we've been working, spending a significant investment of time actually in terms of looking to shape a model of family support. In so many ways, our children's services plan becomes the plan that will deliver on a model of family support. The work within this project end report outlines some of the work we've done around the request for assistance up to this point, but you'll note from the earlier discussion that we're looking to extend that further, and that will be a really, really invaluable source of information to us all in terms of the extent to which we are supporting our children, young people and families going forward. 4.4, there's some promising data coming through around the number of children starting P1 with an identified speech delay. However, we're not 100% confident in that. And again, we have a mechanism to monitor that at every board meeting, because we're conscious that it's been widely reported as a national issue. Still have colleagues in both health and education raising concerns, so we need to be alert to that. We have a fairly comprehensive approach in place through delivery of the Circle framework, but we're not yet convinced that that will be enough. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that. And if we need to do more, we will do more, because we recognise that it's really, really important that actually we get those early skills in place so that young people can progress well. Under 5.2, I mentioned this briefly earlier before. I think we've all done a lot around digital in response to the pandemic, but we've actually got to the point where we've potentially cluttered the landscape a little bit. So a key action for us moving forward is really thinking about those access routes for families to make sure that they are clear of where to go for advice, information, and how they can self-refer, if you like, into services. So that's one where we think we need to re-steer that a little bit to make sure that we're doing the best by our children and families.
Thank you very much for that. And absolutely no need to take anything other than praise for the fact that you've got so many reports coming as end reports. Really well done by the service. Any questions, please? Councillor MacDonald, thanks.
Me a little on page 104 in the data around the city births and recorded drug use, and then it's kind of reflected in 105 in the actual, I guess, births or maternities. I mean, it's sort of. Am I reading it correctly in that it's really under 20s that are presenting possibly with most issues, and of course the data is only up to 2020 to 21s, and that's sort of 2 years out of date. Do we know if that's changed? I was particularly concerned about that 13% and under 20s. It seemed to be going doubled almost.
I think we've got Mr. Rayner online. Do you want to take that one, please?
Hi, thank you. I guess the data is quite mixed. The key source of data that we had been using from Public Health Scotland was ceased to be gathered and published halfway through our project. There is a correlation between deprivation and younger people and substance use and pregnancy. It's always very difficult to tell because we're relying on mums and parents sort of disclosing that they've used substances. I guess what we've learned from the project is that fetal alcohol syndrome is potentially a much bigger issue currently, not just in Aberdeen, but across Scotland. And certainly there's a correlation between fetal alcohol syndrome and lots of other longer term health conditions for people, including substance use, problematic substance use in later life, but also justice issues, learning issues, etc. And what we've agreed is to roll out a sort of awareness campaign around, a sort of public awareness campaign around alcohol use in pregnancy, but also other substances, including cannabis, and that we're going to promote sexual health training to promote sort of easier access to contraception, and we'll do that in conjunction with the clinical network on sexual health and bloodborne viruses within public health. I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, Councillor MacDonald, but happy to
it certainly informs what you know. I you know, that's very, very helpful. I guess what a follow-on question from that would be: is there anything around our student population that impacts on this data or not?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the data, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we don't have data for this that goes to that sort of level of granularity. I guess what we're sort of seeing is that deprivation in younger people, but really what we need to be able to do is take a whole population approach, and we can't really target it and segment it too much. This is one of the difficulties that I suppose it's making every opportunity count in terms of people who are planning to become pregnant, but I guess significant numbers of people who may not be planning to become pregnant but do and might not know that they're pregnant. So I don't think there is a straightforward answer, but we don't have data that links any of this to students in particular.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Radley and then Councillor Gregg. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I had a similar question along the lines of Councillor MacDonald. And I guess it's just trying to understand, obviously, the table has the percentages, but actually, is it the case that the under 20s are a lesser group, therefore the percentages are higher? You know, that sort of, that information would be helpful to give a little bit of context to the percentages, because yeah, no, if that would be possible.
I don't have that data. That's just what's been published. So yes, it could be that there are fewer under 20s becoming pregnant as an overall part of the population, and therefore it's a higher demographic in this. But I'm happy to take away, if we're able to formulate the correct, you know, the question, I'm happy to take it away and look in more detail, if that's helpful. What would be your concern in trying to understand the data?
I guess so for the younger population, if it is because they're a smaller cohort, that is obviously slightly skewing the figures that we've got in front of us. And in numbers terms, they may not be quite as bad as the percentages make it sound, in percentage wise, but also it might be helpful to understand with the younger cohort, if they then go on to have another child or another pregnancy, then does that then reduce their risk of being drug dependent at the time that they are also pregnant for future births or pregnancies? Does that make sense?
I think so. I suppose there's a couple of bits. I mean, I think that younger people are possibly more vulnerable because there's, you know, their life skills in terms of negotiating contraception and or substances might not be so well developed. Their confidence might not be so well developed in relation to that. So I think there is work to do. There is a pan-Grampian sexual health strategy, which we'll feed into. There is a piece of work that's ongoing in parallel with this, which is looking at the needs of mums and parents of people who have had children removed from their care because of drug or alcohol use. So there is a working group where we have some parents who have been affected that way and had children removed who are articulating what their longer term support needs might be. There does seem to be a psychological trauma associated with very young child removal, and those circumstances. That means that people are likely to go on and have subsequent children and pregnancies, and irrespective of whether they continue using substances or not. So there is a more nuanced piece of work looking at, in particular, the psychological impact and needs of women who have had children removed, with the aim of trying to support and reduce the likelihood of future pregnancy and substance use.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Thank you very much. Just before I take in Councillor Gregg, I was going to come back on the point that I think Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Radley were both making about the percentages, because 10% of 100 is 10, 10% of 50 is 5, and I think it's quite important, because I looked at the figures and I was surprised at the table on page 104, which had 40 and over age group, suddenly goes from 0 to 4% and then 3%. And I just think it would be helpful if there was some baseline data to put against that percentage, because I don't know what happens in the maternity world, but do we have swings in age groups on given years? Do we have, substantial changes in age groups in given years? I don't know, but it might just help to explain why we suddenly have those numbers jumping out. And, we've got a rise to 13% for the under 20s. Is that actually more people, or is it just a bigger cohort of a smaller number? I think that would be really helpful to understand if that was at all possible.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that away. The data source that we had got this data from is the one that sort of ceased, and normally we would present it as a rolling average to smooth out the year-on-year sort of variation, but happy to take away that data and put a bit more explanation to it and see if we can trial some data collection with Aberdeen Maternity Service and get some further information to back that up.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregg?
Thanks. Item 3.8 is on expanding digital resources. And there's clearly been some really welcome improvements, some really good solutions there. For example, the Silver Cloud Safer School app, and there's been some really good interventions to help care experienced young people. So it's a great record of relative success, and so that improvement project is leaving a very good legacy. And there is mention of some kind of ongoing monitoring. But I'm just wondering if, can we be reassured that that legacy is going to be as strong as possible, and that we're going to build on it in the future?
Ms. Shepherd?
For you, Chair, yes, absolutely, we will. Some of the tools that we've been using, for example, the Safer School app, unfortunately at the start they hadn't got the mechanism set up to, if you like, do the counting around engagement. So we've been working with them to make sure we can have access to that more fully. What we're also recognising is there's a need for us not to look at that quite so singularly. That we need to almost join up some of the data coming across many of these different tools so that we can get an overarching evaluation of how we're doing. But yes, we'll be doing that, particularly when we take forward the work to streamline access points through the next Children's Services Plan.
Okay, thanks for that. There's also one of the tools is the neurodivergency pathway, which I think that's really positive. That's really helpful. And so that, for example, will link in with other types of processes of care and support, as well as, is that right? They're all interlinking. They do look a little isolated. That's all.
Through you, Chair, that would be the aim. So it's quite an ambitious aim, but that's what we aspire to do.
Great, thank you. That's good to hear. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I have one question. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll just come in now. in relation to 3.7, I see that we have a table on page 120 where we seem to have a spike in what's marked as census 2021. And I just wondered, are we seeing something that's possibly COVID related here? Possibly because I suspect many parents, and as a parent myself, people might have been reluctant to use early learning childcare facilities during the sort of COVID period, and maybe some children didn't find themselves exposed to socialisation quite the way they would normally. I think I've got Mrs. Dickey. I don't know if Mrs. Dickey wants to try and answer that, but I would welcome some kind of assurance around that, please.
I'll maybe go from a school's perspective and then hand over to my colleague. I think it could be. I think if you look at the length of time a little person has been around, and then if you look at the length, the proportionate amount of time where they weren't able to access, for example, early learning and childcare as a result of the lockdown restrictions, it's common sense, isn't it, to say that there will have been an impact on their speech and language development. So we absolutely saw that. That's why we've got built within our children's services plan the need to really keep looking at that. There are positive signs. We have a fairly intensive approach through the Circle framework to try and get ahead of that, but we're conscious that we need to keep monitoring. But I'll hand over to my colleague.
Yeah, I would agree there. We've certainly seen it in the earlier years, the under fives through the health visiting community, and we totally recognise it's through the restrictions that were put through COVID. We've seen it reported back in national data as well. So it's been really useful to be part of this project charter and actually seeing the work that's going to be linked in going forward, because it's a real part of a young person, a young child's adaptation to the world around them and to be able to communicate. And certainly the things that we put in place through this charter around about the training with community childminders, with our partners in early learning, alongside our community nursery nurses that are based within our health visiting teams, to ensure that we are all saying and giving the same advice to our parents out there to give their children the best opportunity to get those early foundations of language in.
And just as a sort of assurance, because I think all parents, particularly with young children, you get very nervous when they're not making a developmental stage or whatever. Is this something we see young children recovering from quite quickly, or over a relatively short space of time? Because, obviously it's something that would, I'm sure, concern lots of parents, and just we've raised it, so let's just put the minds at rest a little bit if we can. Thanks.
We'll do a double act again. I think what's really difficult is, in terms of saying with any confidence, a time scale for recovering. We don't know because we've not experienced this before. What I would say is we've got the best brains around in terms of health and education to look at the identification of the best possible intervention. And we're rolling out the Circle framework, which very much looks at the environment and the way that you interact with children to realise the greatest possible gains. So I think we're confident that we're doing the very best thing that we can do, but we just want to keep an eye on it just to make sure. But my colleague might want to add.
I think what's been heartening as well is our colleagues in speech and language therapy have been developing their own website with videos and things within that that parents can access themselves as well, out with universal services, but also highlighting through the likes of our NHS campaign, social media, etc., things like the BBC resource and Tiny Happy People. Again, we're doing that through all of our partnerships, so parents are getting that same message right through, and also that they have access to us to discuss those concerns. And if things aren't moving in the way and in the timescales that they think they should be, that they've got somebody to come back to and speak to and be guided through with that.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions? I'm not seeing anything on the board, and I'm not seeing any Anybody in the room? In that case, can we, for 3.5, can we agree the recommendation at page 110? Can 3.6, the recommendations at page 117, 3.7, the recommendations at page 125, and for 3.8, the recommendations at 133. Can we agree them, please? Thank you very much indeed. Turning off my mic there. In that case, if we could move to 3.9, 3.10 and 3.11, which is the project reports 6.1, 6.2 and 7.3. And Mrs. Shepherd, again, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, three quite different charters here. The first one very much focused on our care experienced young people securing a positive and sustained destination. So we've reported there on the impact of MCR pathways, and I would have to say the evidence base, I would say, isn't conclusive. As a result of looking at that data coming through, we have put in place a number of other interventions which will carry forward into the next Children's Services Plan. You may be aware we have 2 pilots being run that we're calling our Edge of Care pilots that are very much have taken employability lens with young people and their parents and carers. And we also have established posts of Pathways Associates, which we think are actually probably more likely to realise the improvement. So we've reported of where we've got to by looking solely at MCR, but recognise there's much more to do, and that work will continue and has been watched very, very closely. We continue, as you'll know, to look at kingship care and looking at the number of children who are looked after at home. I think there's some really positive data coming through, some really positive data when you compare us with National 2. Obviously, our work in upholding and keeping the promise is really important, and this work again continues through the delivery of the Children's Services Plan. And on the last one there, we had a focus very much on raising attainment, as you would expect. Again, although we have achieved that aim, we look to continue that, and if you like, in many ways to increase the ambition going forward within the refreshed Children's Services Plan. The really exciting work being undertaken, what we're calling ABZ Campus, I think it could potentially be really quite transformational. We have very close partnership working with our colleagues, particularly in NESCOL, around delivery of that. So again, there'll be similar reports coming through where we've potentially raised the aspirations somewhat within the new plan.
Thank you very much for that. Questions, please, Councillor Gregg. Thanks.
Thank you. I think the campus and ABZ Works and these other educational relationships are so important. Is there sufficient substantial input from partners to ensure that these learning opportunities are being maximised as much as possible? I mean, in particular, the universities and NESCOL. Is there scope for further input from them?
To you, Chair. We've had excellent buy-in from partners, working very much in collaboration with both further and higher education. Some really interesting thinking coming out around articulation routes into higher education, and obviously working with NESCOL in terms of offering that broader range of pathways. So the engagement we've had has been really positive. I think we're all looking very closely at the outcome of the various education reforms, because I think that will help us crystallise that way of working going forward. ABZ, certainly, it's phase 1 for June of this year, and phase 2, which will be, again, significantly more again for June 2024, but could have no complaints whatsoever in terms of how well partners are coming together with us.
Okay, thank you. Could I come back? I'm aware that FE and HE will have their own performance targets and indicators, performance indicators relating to their desire to increase engagement and attendance at their institutions from people from areas of deprivation. And I think that the campus, ABZ Works and the other projects will surely help them to reach these these really important goals to ensure that there's access and inclusion for people from all areas, whatever your talent is. So is that kind of performance information related to what we're doing through Community Planning Aberdeen? Because I would have thought that there's a great deal of mutual support going on there. I mean, so I mean, are the institutions getting the help and achieving the aims that that they wish to as well?
I'll do my best to answer that. One of the challenges, I guess, is that each part of the system actually is measured on slightly different data sets, which isn't always terribly helpful. I would hope that through the education reforms, and certainly I'm picking up an intent to actually join it up a lot more, because I think that would be more helpful to us all. What I can say is that certainly from our discussions, particularly with one of the universities, there's a real desire to look very much at that widening access with us, as opposed to looking at maybe other local authorities that are a wee bit kind of further away. So that's all encouraging. I would hope within the education reform that we have an opportunity to build a truly integrated, joined up system, that you can actually look at the, if you like, ebb and flow between each part of it, because I think that would be helpful for us all.
Thank you. I'm just hopeful that our local FE and HE sector are being proactive in engaging as fully as possible in community planning. That was the point that I wanted to make, because it is to their advantage to meet their targets and for everyone. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any hands on the board, and I'm not seeing anything in the room. So in that case, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just really to ask Mrs. Shepherd, the tables on page 148. I just wondered if we'd got any kind of longer term data in terms of these things, or is it are we just got the kind of 2-year data?
I think that's maybe one for Mr. Simpson, is it?
Yeah, happy to take that one, Chair, and through yourself, I'm happy to respond. So the data on page 148, Councillor Cook, is in relation to the lifetime of the project. Clearly, we would have data that goes back beyond that timescale and can provide that if that would be helpful. Certainly, this data will continue to be reported going forward as part of our work in relation to the Children's Services Plan. But absolutely, I would have data that goes beyond the lifetime of the project, but going back over years, because it's statutory reporting that we have to provide to government.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I wouldn't want to generate work that isn't necessary. I mean, if it's kind of something that could be accessed very easily, fine. If it's going to take someone off the day job generating lots of figures just for my curiosity, I wouldn't want that to happen.
I think I can provide that data fairly quickly to you, Councillor, and I'll issue it to Mrs. Swanson to be distributed around the Community Planning Board.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any hands. I can hardly see when things come up on the board. I need Mrs. Swanson to tell me. Okay, that means we'll go back then, and for project 3.9, project N 6.1, the recommendations are on page 142, 143. 3.10, project N 6.2, the recommendations are on page 151, and paper 3.11, project N 7.3, the recommendations are on page 159. Can we agree those recommendations? Thank you. That then takes us to 3.12, which is project N 9.1, 3.13, project 9.2, 3.13, 3.14 and 3.15. And again, Mrs. Shepherd, do you want to introduce that? Thanks.
Thank you. So again, some really positive project ends coming through here. There's a number of projects that have actually achieved their aims. 9.1 successfully looked to reduce offending in the 16, 17-year-old category. So I think that's really helpful. There was also a focus around bereavement support, which you'll have noticed continues into the next Children's Services Plan, because we recognise that there's still a piece of work to do there. The project team around 9.2 have successfully managed to reduce the number of offences by 10%. So I think there's a really positive and good news story in there. Similarly, there's been a reduction under the Charter at 9.4, not quite met our aim, but there has been that reduction. So again, you'll see that piece of work continuing into the next Children's Services Plan. And around 9.5, a report there in terms of some of the work that's been done in one part of the city around youth activity. And again, that need to continue and take that forward into the next Children's Services Plan.
Thank you very much for that. Questions, please? I'm not seeing any. Oh, Councillor MacDonald, thanks.
I'm slowing down a bit. I'm struggling a little to keep up with the paperwork. It was around the risk about the Children's Care and Justice Bill on Project 9.1, and whilst there is no timetable, what is it that we're thinking about in terms of risks around that piece of legislation?
Mrs. Milne?
I guess we've seen the bill, it's presented to Parliament, but we don't know what exactly the final iteration will be. The extension of or the increase of age of referral to reporter will have an impact. So I guess some of those risks are remain a little unknown in terms of exactly what that final bill and act will look like.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any hands. I've got two. My first one is actually aimed at the Project N 9.2 and is to do with the digital offences by young people. I wondered, this is something we often see in the sort of red tops, and they tend to sometimes maybe blow very hot on something around this. The paper tells us that the threshold for criminality. Could you give us some background into what that would entail? Because clearly, if I've read the paper and understood it correctly, we're saying that sometimes this doesn't meet that threshold, and it might be helpful. I don't know if everybody in the room understands it quite as well as our police colleagues do. Yeah.
Quite often, these offences will take place between two young people, and they don't actually understand that what they're doing is committing an offence. So instead of looking to criminalise these young people, we'll work with education and partners to see if there's a more appropriate way to deal with them. And then education will quite often take a single agency approach.
Thank you very much, because I think quite often we see some of these things appearing in the media, and I'm not sure we always get the accurate story at the end of the day. And I just wondered, how do you decide whether that's going to be the case? I just wonder if you can give us some sort of broad outline as to how you decide whether to go down the criminality route or to say, no, this should be diverted to another partner or whatever. Thanks.
Yeah, so there'll always be an interagency referral discussion takes place. So that's where all the partners are around the table, and we present all of our own organisation information on that child, and it'll be a multi-agency decision that's made at the end whether to, well, what route to take.
Thank you very much for that. And my other question was actually in relation to paper 3.14 about youth antisocial behaviour. I certainly picked up from going to community councils and things in the post-COVID world that we seem to speak about quite a lot these days, that there was something of a spike in terms of antisocial behaviour, and I wonder if some of it was just, I could use the term, and it's probably the wrong term, but some letting off steam by youth who suddenly were able to come out and about into social gatherings and, you know, actually be with their friends and their peer groups. And I just wonder if we could have some commentary in and around that, because it seems to suggest there was a problem that maybe isn't quite the problem that statistics sometimes suggest. I wonder if somebody can take that one, please. Mr. Shepherd, I think you're offering, and I don't know if our police colleagues are offering something.
Thank you. I agree with you. I think that we had young people who weren't allowed to be around their peers. There is an element of you need to practice a skill to keep it fresh. There was a long time where they weren't allowed to interact with their peers, and I think that did lead to a spike. I'm pleased to see that things appear to be settling down, certainly from what's been reported by our schools. But again, I think those period of lockdown did impact on young people. But colleagues in police may have a slightly different.
Thank you. No, I agree with that as well. Actually, I think as well as the youth being given their freedom back, essentially, I think there's probably been a reduction in tolerance from the general public as well. I think we had those strict rules for a year or 2 years almost, and I think now the slightest of thing will be straight on the phone to the police really to report issues. Whereas a lot of the incidents that we review, there's no criminality, there's not really any antisocial behaviour either. It could just be kids gathering, which is generally what kids do to socialise. But yeah, I would agree with what you said there.
No, thank you for that, because, you know, it's a while since I was that age, but we used to certainly just hang about and probably weren't doing anything too serious. But I think, you know, people did get into a little bit of a habit of phoning the police, or police, sorry, it'll be nice. And, you know, I just wondered if that was indeed the case. I see Mr. O'Connor's got his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Reading the report in 3.14, it's amazing to see the impact and the success it can have when there's multi-agencies working together. But it kind of raises a question I've probably raised for about 27 years doing what I do in my day job. Right across Aberdeen, we've got 40 community centres. And one of the biggest problems is for your Waynes that are primary aged and secondary age, there's very, very little youth clubs. The traditional where you can get in a game of football, sports, pool, snooker, Xbox, etc. I know from my own day job that it's very successful, and it's no coincidence our building's not been touched in 27 years. So I suppose for all of us as partners, and the police will probably kind of verify this, and the police services behind me, what can we do as a collective to try and find funding so every community project centre in this city has youth clubs and opportunities which would reduce, as this report shows, the level of antisocial behaviour? It is a big challenge because, you know, you can get volunteers, which is vital, but you do need a small core of paid staff to support that. So I suppose it's just a challenge for us all. How and when can we resolve this? Because it is a very long-term issue in the city.
Thank you. I think Mr. Shepherd's wanting to come in, but I don't know if Mr. Singer wants to perhaps pass a comment. But what I was going to say is, you know, I think from partners, particularly the police, I've heard some of the work that they've done up at Langstracht and at Northfield, and are currently doing in my ward at Kincorth. You know, some of it is really excellent work, and it's been shown to have a huge impact going forward. But I'll let the officers come in and maybe give some answers.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a need for that activity, that positive activity, that I think maybe for a while was seen to be a bit of an old-fashioned approach. I think it's exactly what young people want. We're quite fortunate, again, we've actually got youth workers attached to schools. Now, currently, their interventions are purely during school hours, but I think there's potentially a conversation that Mr. Singer and I need to have in terms of how we utilise those staff. I think there's some key learning coming through the data that I referenced earlier around the mental health and well-being of children and young people, which would suggest that that is the right thing for us to do. And certainly a number of young people have said to me, particularly within the context of the cost of living crisis, that actually they would want that kind of locally based provision. So I'd be more than happy to come and have a conversation with you about that, because I think that is something that is within our gift to do. I think it's about us just prioritising what we do.
Thank you. Mr. Singer, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I just wanted to just reiterate what people were saying. My improvement project was focused on one neighbourhood in particular, King Corth. And I suppose what we wanted to find out was to see whether there's an appetite for the kind of community provision where young people come together and just blow off steam, hang about, make friends, take part in activities, learn new skills, etc. And what I've found in a short period of time we've been doing the project is overwhelmingly yes. Children, young people definitely want to come out at night, out of their bedrooms, out of their homes, and meet their friends, have connections, have fun, and just feel safe. So absolutely, it is unfortunate there's not. We're not able at the moment to cover every single neighbourhood in the city, but definitely have a conversation with Ms Shepherd and Mr O'Connor as well.
Thank you for that. I don't know if any of our police colleagues want to come back in on that. No, okay. What I would say to the board is we have a visit coming up on the 11th of May at 6 o'clock at Marshall College to see the work that's going on with the ASBO team. So I think that's a visit that would be helpful, and I would encourage everybody to consider maybe coming along to that one and actually getting a chance to see firsthand what is actually taking place in some of our communities and some of the work that's actually being done on the ground. I'm sure it'll be very informative to most of us. Councillor MacDonald, I see your hands up. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I really welcome some of the initiatives, having been at the community planning event in the Cowdray Hall and heard about the initiative at Tesco. It was very heartening to hear. And yes, young people do congregate. I saw yesterday as I was going past a girl sitting on the lion at the Cowdray Hall with dressed in black with 3 or 4 others dressed in black as well, just crowding around, hoodies up, just chatting. And that's what young people do. It's what I did, and it's what young people do. But there is an edge, and when you look at the on page 182 and you see that the city centre is up there and the north and the south are further down, there is that city centre magnet that young people do come together, and we do want them to have a safe, enjoyable, fun experience, but too often it's not happening in the city centre, and there's argy-bargy carry-on, and sometimes it's got even worse than that. And some of the behaviour is absolutely intolerable for people living in the city centre, including, we've all been, bad as kids and done things, but in breaking windows and throwing stones and things like that, that is not behaviour that is acceptable. And that's, when we need the police really to step in. But it's not always easy to know how those crimes happen. It's maybe not always kids. You just don't know. But we do need to drill down a bit further, I think, into what is happening in our city centre, because there is other people are not feeling safe, and I don't think some young people are feeling safe to go into the city centre as well. So I think it is something that we do want to address, and I'd be interested in seeing data not just to the end of 2022, but as we go forward. So it's heartening to see that we will be keeping a really close eye on it, but there are big issues, I think, that are there at the moment, and there is not a lot sometimes of free things to do in the city centre. We had a very good presentation from young people here in the chamber to council, and that was one of the things the girls particularly brought up, that they didn't know of a lot of things they could do. And we do know that there are places you can go to that are free in the city centre, but it's getting that word out of what you can do, I think, is important as well.
Thank you for that. I would as well remind everybody we have a continuing project for tackling antisocial behaviour, and that is an ongoing project. But I would again stress that it might be helpful to actually have the members consider coming along to that meeting on the 11th of May. I think it would be very helpful for us all to see the difficulties that our colleagues sometimes face in dealing with some of the problems that Councillor MacDonald has correctly highlighted. I don't know if any officer wants to come back on that at all.
Just to address the comment trying about policing stepping up for that, we've got a city centre team. We know the challenges that are happening within the city centre. Not every night, but there are challenges, and really reassured that the city centre partnership's coming together, reinvigorated, and a lot of action is coming together as a result of that group and some helpful conversations. But it isn't just the role of the policing in this. From our perspective, in terms of how we treat police and how we treat children and criminalising them, that is, and with the greatest respect, sometimes an old-fashioned view in terms of what powers and policies the police actually have to deal with young people. As we've seen the age of criminal responsibility increased, we've also seen what in terms of what we can do in terms of not taking children into police custody. Often these children are taken home to their parents, and there is evidence that police officers have taken action, taken these children home as per what we're legally allowed to do, and these children are then back out again and creating problems for police officers to then take them back again to come out. It's a challenging one in terms of my officers have got to act within the law and what's lawful, and also the rights of the children. So it's a challenging one. It's definitely not a single agency approach to just criminalising the children and dealing with it, because as we can see, that doesn't answer the problem, and often, and unfortunately, there are isolated occasions where the only time that problem is resolved is if that child goes into adulthood and they do get criminalised, and there's more punitive action taken through the court. So I just want to make the point that actually, I mean, I'm really reassured round about the city centre team, and not just the police but the wider partnership are stepping up. They understand the problem. We hear the concerns from both the residential and the business communities. But we do have a city centre to be proud of. We've just gone through Purple Flag accreditation. Whilst there's no notification in terms of the result of that, the feedback was positive, and that doesn't just happen. It certainly doesn't happen within a city centre that doesn't have good partnership working, doesn't recognise the challenges, because any city centre up and down the country will have challenges, whether that's through antisocial behaviour from youths or other. There always will be that, because that's the draws of city centre. But I think we need to be proud of the groups that we have, the action that we're taking. And this isn't necessarily a new problem, unfortunately. When I think back to my time as Chief Inspector for the city centre, that's over 6 years ago now. Similar issues were there as well. That doesn't mean to say that we've never quite cracked it. It probably just underlines a sense that, whilst we see COVID as an issue of cuds coming back out, this isn't necessarily a new issue nonetheless, but equally we've got tried and tested methods to address it. And it's not just the Aberdeen kids that we're seeing kids come from a number of areas to come into it. So it's difficult also to particularly target communities to say, setting up particular groups within other communities to do it. So actually providing something for young people to come and do meaningfully in the city centre is most definitely a suggestion that the police would support and try in some way to help along with that. But I guess in a long-winded way, I kind of just said in terms of what the police can do round about this, and criminalising young people isn't necessarily the answer to the problem.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Chair. I'm kind of hopeful that our meeting in May, was it the 11th? I'm kind of hopeful that will be an opportunity for us to continue this discussion about how we can continue to work together to deal with changes and movements in cultural attitudes within families and amongst young people, because I think that it's very clear from the improvement plans that we've looked at today and from the past that the preventative agenda really does work. It is such an important part of containing and managing disorder and antisocial behaviour, for example, by young people. There's very clear historical evidence of the benefits of investing in street sport as early as possible, and that's clearly brought benefits in reducing the problems of antisocial behaviour in the areas where they've operated. Many other examples, the Tesco Hub and others. So I think that in a time of reducing public sector resources, I think that is important for us to continue to focus on the preventative agenda, to make sure that we're continuing to invest and support. The police put possibly a disproportionate amount of effort into that preventative agenda through their involvement in street sport and many other. Tesco Hub police are involved in that. So hopefully that will be a continuation of our conversation in May, where we can, find out how can we continue to support each other into the future, because we've got solutions in the preventative projects that we have. So let's develop that and build on that. Thanks.
Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a final wee comment. When the young people are, involved in antisocial behaviour, it often is what is highlighted the most, and it's in the press, and we all feel it in our communities. So don't think any of us escape it. But it's just to make the comment that the vast overwhelming majority are kind of, children and youths, that they're actually really positively engaging in your community. Getting involved in volunteering and seeing Colin's report as well there, Duke of Edinburgh, Saltire, and actually really respect to the community. So I suppose it's just a wee comment to say that, yes, we know that side exists, but the vast majority are really kind of decent young citizens for our city.
Wholeheartedly agree with that. I think most young people would surprise us with how far they would actually go to help someone in the street. And that's certainly been my experience in more recent times. I'm always pleasantly surprised at how helpful young people in our society are. Do we have any more questions on this? I'm not seeing any hands and I'm not seeing anybody on the board. So with that, for 3.12, the recommendations are on page 169, 313, the recommendations, page 176, 314 on page 184, and 315 on page 195. Can we agree those recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. That takes us then to 3.16, Project N 10.3. Which is to reduce the number of willful fires by 10% by 2022, and 3.17, Project End 11.2, to increase opportunities for people to increase their contribution to communities, volunteering by 10%. I think we've got Alison MacLeod who's going to briefly take us through the two papers, and then we can go to questions. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the project around willful fires, a 12% reduction has been achieved. The focus here was on changing behaviours through engagement, education and interaction, and also through better management of available combustible materials to reduce opportunistic fire setting. There were 84 walk and talks across 13 schools, reaching 1,666 pupils. 8 young people have successfully completed the initial fire skills course, and 7 offenders participated in the fire setters intervention. The changes tested are now embedded as business as usual within Scottish Fire and Rescue Aberdeen City local plan, and the data will continue to be monitored as part of their internal scrutiny and performance reporting. In terms of increasing volunteering opportunities by 10% by 2023, the overall increase achieved was 17.4%. The project aimed to build on the existing good partnership work already taking place with regards to community involvement, engagement and volunteering, and included partnership working across public services. The focus was on developing, promoting and coordinating the availability of volunteering opportunities, as well as the wider benefits of these, and also introducing mechanisms to support and enable communities to feel confident and empowered, providing a network of support. There are plans to sustain the improvements linked to the 7 improvement aims within the new community empowerment strategy. So that's just a brief overview of the 2, and the project managers are available to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. First of all, on volunteering, I'm convinced that it's kind of kicking at an open door there. I think that there's massive goodwill, huge amount of desire in the communities to volunteer. So it's really good to see action on that front. I wanted to ask about the previous report, however, on the fire skills course and other educational interventions. The fire skills course, that looks really successful. Is that going to be expanded, and maybe other fire education activities, will that be growing, because they are clearly having a good impact?
Mr. Buchan, do you want to try and take that one, please?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we can confirm that the fire skills courses will continue into the next fiscal year, or this fiscal year. We are planning to have a minimum of 4, 1 per quarter.
Okay.
If we can expand on that, we will. It's just obviously it's solely funded by the Fire and Rescue Service at the moment, and with the financial landscape at the moment, we will try our best to ensure we achieve that. With the fire skills, we have opened that up across all Aberdeen City secondary schools, and we are looking at further pathways of identifying our most vulnerable youth within our society, so that we can direct target those individuals and obviously give them a better opportunity moving forward within their youth into adult life.
Thank you for the project and the intervention. That's really much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Radley.
Thank you. And I would like to give my thanks to the Fire and Rescue Service. Obviously, Kincorth and Cove is my area. It's my ward, and the positive impact on the amount of fire raising in the grants specifically has been significant as a result of this project. I guess my question is around, has there been any engagement with, the parent voice groups, etc., who might actually benefit from having some of this information that they can then sort of instill at home as well, or has it solely been children groups to this point?
To this point, it has only been solely to the children in the primary and secondary schools of that ward. As of this past month, we've put in a new initiative across Aberdeen City where we've allocated our resources to the same structure as Police Scotland for neighbourhoods and wards. That's allowed us to ensure that there's a single point of contact per ward looking at direct targeting for that needs of that community. We are working with our partners to identify different groups and committees that we can now go and engage with now post-COVID restrictions are easing a lot more. So with that, we will be looking at direct target incident type and getting that message across all varieties, whether it be children, adults, businesses, just to get the consistent message that we need.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cook online is coming in. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and it's kind of a sort of a follow-on from that question on the fire raising. So I think Alison McLeod said 84 walk and talk sessions across 16 schools. Did I hear that correctly? And I'm just wondering about the resource implications if this becomes embedded business as usual and is rolled out across the city as a whole. Are colleagues from Scottish Fire and Rescue comfortable that they've got the resources for that?
Yeah, we have embedded that within our strategic plan for reduction for this following fiscal year. As far as resources and funding, the walks and talks is part of our engagement tool anyway, so our staff are paid to be on station to underengage in that. It's when it starts to come to the likes of the fire skills where we then have to pay for transportation, pay for food, equipment, and so that the funding can become a bit more of an issue for us.
No, thanks for that. That sounds reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? I'm not seeing anything on the board and I'm not seeing anything in the room. We have the recommendation for 3.16 project N 10.3 at page 201 and for 317 project end 11.2 at page 209. Can we agree those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. And that then takes us to 3.18, Community Empowerment Update and Project Charters. Mrs. Crombie, do you want to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This paper presents the 7 improvement project charters that we have included on our community empowerment strategy that the board approved in November. So they're included in the appendix for approval, and we were keen to bring these forward as soon as possible so that we can really signal our commitment to embedding and implementing that strategy. The paper also, as well as the 7 charters, gives an update on where we are with our communications plan for launching that strategy. So wanted to draw the board's attention to an event that we've got planned on the 13th of May. So this was our community conference that we just planned as part of that communications launch plan. You hopefully have already seen flyers and communications that have gone out about that event, so would encourage board members to attend and also to cascade to your contacts so we can get as many community members attending as possible. In addition, the paper gives a very brief update on locality planning. Our locality empowerment groups are a core mechanism of our community empowerment strategy and how we'll engage with community members. So members have raised previously that the locality empowerment groups haven't met for some time. So providing an update here that we have a new integrated locality planning team between the council and the Health and Social Care Partnership to drive forward improvements in locality planning in general, as well as getting those locality empowerment groups up and running again. So they are due, we'll have our first one by the end of this month. And I think the only other thing I wanted to just highlight is that in terms of next steps, subject to the charters, of course, being approved, we will report on those projects as part of the CPA improvement programme. But just to also highlight that the strategy, although there's a focus on those 7 improvement projects, it does set out guiding principles for all partners to take forward as single system organisations. So there is an offer for partners to invite us to the appropriate management team so that we can just give a briefing to partners on what your individual duties are and how we can support you to deliver those in terms of the Community Empowerment Act.
Thank you very much for that. Questions, please, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. There's some really good evidence there of very strong engagement with communities, but City Voice seems to have dropped by about a half over 4 or 5 years. Its participation, is there a reason for that?
In all honesty, I think that the key reason for that is going to be that the panel was just outdated. I think there was a lot of panel members that had stopped engaging for different reasons. It hadn't been refreshed in some years. So we've already undertaken a panel refresh, and our first City Voice survey is already showing a huge improvement in the response rate. So it's a smaller panel following that refresh. So there's still something about continuing to actively recruit to the panel to ensure it's as representative as possible. However, at the moment, the sample does give us a good representation of the city. And as I say, we're already seeing improvements, but that doesn't take away from some of the other change ideas to continue to strengthen that panel.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see that the graph is on an upward trajectory again. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've got two questions that are kind of interlinked. One is on 16.1 City Voice, and the other is 16.4 community involvement, and they kind of interlink. I'm interested, obviously we need to increase numbers of people participating, and that's, you know, a task in itself, but it's more the diversity part that I'm kind of wanting to focus on. How do we get people from different community groups, be that ethnic groups, or, you know, but more importantly, in some ways, different age groups, because a lot of the people that seem to be willing to give their time are maybe not in the younger age groups and representing some of the younger citizens of the city. And I'm kind of interested as to what we can maybe do to try and pull in that cohort a little bit more, because, you know, I do think as you maybe get older, you maybe do feel a little bit more socially responsible. You do become more involved, hopefully, in things because your children are at school and you take part in all sorts of things. And I think that probably applies across a number of groups, but it's how do we get those younger people in? I wonder if we could have just some commentary on that.
Yep, certainly. So in terms of general diversity, I have to stress that across the 7 projects there are links all over the place. So there's planned improvement activity by the community empowerment group that will impact and touch across all the projects. So one of those planned activities is GREC are holding a series of workshops to engage with our diverse communities and just to dig a bit deeper with them, that how can we get that across the range of mechanisms that the Community Planning Partnership use. So we've got that planned as part of our City Voice improvement project, but it will touch upon the other projects. So I think in terms of specific ideas, we're still at the beginning of that, so we have to do that engagement, but that's absolutely key to it. And I don't mean to put Margaret on the spot, but we've got Margaret here who is leading our project about child's rights, and Eleanor spoke earlier about embedding it in the work that we do, which absolutely is the approach that the Children's Services Board will take. But we've also got this in addition to put some specific improvement methodology around some specific ideas. So I just wondered if I can invite you and Margaret to answer that one.
Yes, so within the children's voice, we're looking at ensuring that children are involved in decisions that affect them. And I think that the groups that we have identified so far, so we've got the Aberdeen Youth Movement are on board, and we've also got input from Creative Learning, who were involved in the delegation that came to full council, really kind of sharing young people's kind of thoughts and you know and wants of our city. So I think it's going to be quite exciting to really explore young people's voice and ensuring that we're engaging with them in a way that's really kind of relevant and we're listening to them. And also, you know, where are those kind of points, as you sort of say? So, you know, if you've got young people who are engaged, how do we keep them engaged? How do we keep that sort of relevance of engaging within communities? So yeah, really looking forward to taking this improvement project forward.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor MacDonald.
I really welcome you know, a lot, or everything that's the ambition to go ahead with these charters. I just have it's not a reservation, but I do wonder how some groups fit into the idea of what a project is and how some groups don't. So, for example, the Reclaim the Night group is not constituted as a group, but it is very much a community of women coming together to do something. And it's, you know, as an annual event, but also meet and speak throughout the year. Then you have things like Mela, which comes together for a particular event, but it is very much a team that comes together, and how that fits into it, or even something like the Belmont campaign, which comes together, but it's very much a different type of community coming together. And so it's just hopefully that there's enough in one or some of these charters that picks up projects as diverse as that, as well as all the other projects which pop up through different community partners and different projects and so on. And hopefully I'll hear a positive yes, that all those types of groups can be included.
That is certainly the plan, Councillor MacDonald, and our community gathering that we've got planned on the 13th of May is an attempt to try and connect with some of these groups that we maybe don't have established relationships with. We are opening up our invite to any community group across the city to have a stall at that event, and we have had lots of inquiries from groups that I've certainly not heard of before. So we will need to go through some shortlisting for that, because obviously we've got limitations with the space. But what it does is it opens up a conversation with them, and we absolutely don't place any restrictions on what's a formal group that we'll engage with. We're open to all communities.
Just to say, Chair, I haven't actually seen anything around what's happening on the 13th of May as yet. There's nothing in my diary, and that might be my oversight, but it would be useful to share that, although maybe the media launch is still to happen.
There has been communications that have gone out from the community planning account, but I can certainly put a diary invite into board members' diaries as well, just so you definitely see that. But communications will continue to ramp up right up until the event. So if you've not seen it by now, hopefully we'll make sure you definitely do.
Very much.
Thanks for that. Councillor Radley, please.
Just on that point, I've also not seen anything about it. Sorry, but it might be helpful if something could be even sent round the council groups, because a lot of our councillors are very embedded into the communities that they serve, and will know of community groups that maybe won't have seen any communication about it. So even if there's a poster or something that can be shared with the council group, it might be helpful. We can get that message out there as well.
Yep, that would be brilliant. Work for us to cascade that as well. So make sure we do that.
Oh, well, I'm going to be a smarty pants and say I've got it in my diary. Sorry. No, yeah, it has gone out, but let's put it out again, and we can maybe ask officers to do some more social media, because I certainly have seen it on social media. So it's sometimes, down to some of the groups you subscribe to. But that's certainly worth going again. Any further questions? No. The recommendations are on page 214. Can we agree the recommendations? Agreed, thank you. That takes us to 4.1, CPA budget setting report from 2023-24. And again, if I can ask Mrs. Crombie to introduce the report, please.
Thanks, Chair. This report is consistent with reports that you've received in previous years in terms of the contributions being made by partners. So it's the same partner contributions that we've received as previous, and that's from Aberdeen City Council, NHS Grampian, Police Scotland and Nest Trans. There is, however, a new section to this report that won't have been in previous versions, and that's highlighting some issues we're having with our Community Planning Aberdeen website. We really rely on the website as a central source of information for all communities and partners, and those that are familiar with the website will know that you can find absolutely anything on there about the business of the Community Planning Partnership. So it's really relied upon, but also as we ramp up what we're doing with communities and trying to engage them, we want that to be a really sound source of information for them. However, the website has become unstable. It is independent from the council's website. It's on WordPress for anyone that is aware of these kind of applications. We don't have the technical knowledge of WordPress within the council to be able to manage it, and it's just become really unmanageable for the team. So it's not an IT issue at all. It is a kind of knowledge of the website. So it has led us to really just review what our options are around that going forward. It's gone down at key times, and we can't continue to progress with it. So the paper sets out 4 options that have different investment requirements. Option 1 would be our ideal situation in developing a brand new website that's accessible, that it's been designed to cope with our current needs and demands. Our existing website has kind of evolved over time, so it's a wee bit patchy. There is a cost involved in that. We've linked in with procurement and taken a quote from an organisation that we use. So the approximate figure that we're getting for that would be a 10,000 investment to create the website, and then there would be a £2,000 ongoing maintenance fee per year. Looking at other options, then we could just have this company support us in revamping our current website. So they wouldn't recreate it for us, but they could help us make improvements. For that, they would charge us £2,160, but there would be a hefty annual support fee for that, which would be £5,000 a year. Option 3 is that they wouldn't help us redesign our website at all, so we can continue to use our website, but to be able to access that technical support that we are missing at the moment, that would cost us £5,000 a year. So option 4 would be that we could just recreate our Community Planning Aberdeen website as part of the council's website. There's no upfront payment required for that, apart from, of course, officer support to transfer that all over. Obviously, the con of that would be that it would not be a neutral space for all partners. It would become part of the council's website, which kind of takes away from what we've got with the independent Community Planning Aberdeen website. So for transparency, we've set these options out for members. We're looking for investment from partners or an indication of where investment might be available, or indeed a preference of option.
Can I maybe jump in first and ask, are we needing that commitment today, or are we just needing it in the days to come type thing?
I think if there was a chance that there might be some investment come forward, we'd certainly be able to extend that period. It's just to say that whilst we've got the current situation, it isn't ideal, but we don't need to make it today.
Thank you. That's kind of helpful. I have a second question, because I do like the idea that, you know, we maintain our own website, because the partners, you know, I think it just is the right thing to do. But I was looking at the budget, and I did see that there was a fairly substantial carry forward of 3791 that appears to have been allocated for some time. And I just wondered what was actually happening with that money, if that money could perhaps be used in some way or put towards this, either in whole or in part, because it's a fair sum of money. And if the Civic Forum are needing funds subsequently, then that's maybe something we can look at in future budgets, if we need to give them a budget. But it seems if that money's been sitting there for that length of time, I'm kind of wondering if that's something we should be looking at in terms of what we can actually maybe use towards this project. Quite a lot in there, but I wonder if you wanted to give some commentary. Yeah.
Yes, the reason that the budget has sat there for some time, apart from them having minimal costs, I think their costs seem to relate to their own website, so it's been quite small amounts. So that pot's kind of lasted a long time. However, my understanding is that the Civic Forum hasn't met since the pandemic. It was disrupted during that period, and from speaking with the chair, Jonathan Smith, I think he has struggled to reconvene the Civic Forum. So I think it's still in his intention to try and bring it together. However, he's equally, because I have mentioned to him about the website challenges we're having, so he has been open to exploring that, but would suggest that we could go back to Jonathan just to get clarity about whether the Civic Forum needs that money or will indeed continue.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connor, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a sum of money held by ACFO some time ago. Is this the sum, and was that transferred over?
No, this is the sum.
Okay, thank you, because I need to speak to Maggie then about that. And a subsequent question to that is the 3,791. Where did it actually come from for the Civic Forum? Was it a funded project, which might mean we can't use it? So that's probably a question. Where did that money come from?
And it's a legacy from an arrangement that we'd had with ACFO previously, that they were allocated £5,000 to hold for the Civic Forum per year. So the board made the decision a few years ago that that was withdrawn, that there wasn't the need for that, but they were left with this pot of money that was left over from previous years, and that because they don't have a bank account, ACFO hold that on their behalf.
Does that help, Mr. O'Connor? Yeah.
I think the question was the original 5,000. Where did that funding come from initially? So we know whether you can use it if Jonathan was in agreement.
It would have been included in the SLA with ACFO, so essentially the council would have been paying that money to them.
Any other queries? The hands have jumped up. We're speaking money. I saw Councillor MacDonald first and then Councillor Gregg. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to understand the budgets as I see them in front of me. So on under 2.1, that's the proposed contributions from the partners. And then the budget commitment on under 3.1 just takes that sum and mashes it all up, and then is that the budget for what we do as a board, most of it going to Fairer Aberdeen fund? I'm just not understanding that particular table at 3.1.
That is how the money that partners contribute is then allocated. So a large amount of that is the Fairer Aberdeen fund that is comes from the council's budget that we would see as being part of how we support community plan in Aberdeen. So a large amount of that is there. Also that ACFO third sector interface engagement, again, a bulk of that is paid by the council, but also we've got the contributions for partners that are supporting that. The central support as well, partners are contributing to that. So obviously that 37,000 isn't the entirety of the cost of that central support. Previously, the line would have been City Voice, but with the outcomes framework and further work, I think we've expanded that line just to show that it's broader than just City Voice, that 37,000 is paying for. And then the final element is, of course, the Civic Forum.
So my understanding is that there isn't any pot of money then available at the moment for, contingencies like the website falling over and so on. So effectively, we're looking for an extra. I'm a bit like yourself, Chair. I think it's important not to be subsumed into the council website and to have, a community planning partnership website sitting up there, and my personal view would be option one, but I don't have 10 grand in my pocket to pay for it. So yeah, it's just how that comes about. I understand the the questions around some of that money that might be available, but if everybody put in a couple of grand, could we do it that way?
what I was going to suggest, and it was just a suggestion for the members, was that obviously once we've finished questions, we could perhaps decide, do we wish to have option 1, 2, 3, or 4? And that should hopefully be a fairly straightforward process. And I was then going to suggest we maybe take this offline from this meeting, because we have the question that Mr. O'Connor has correctly raised about the nearly £4,000. Now that's almost a third of one of the options, and I wonder if we then have a conversation about what all the partners feel they are able to contribute from existing budgets, because most of us will probably have to go away and actually look and see what, if any, budgets there actually are. So that was going to be my suggestion to the board. I'm quite willing to entertain any other options or suggestions, but you know, maybe that's something we can come to when we've finished our questions. Is anybody otherwise minded? Not seeing any hands. In that case, do we have any more questions just now? Oh, Councillor Gregg, sorry, I forgot you had a hand.
Yeah, this might relate to your proposal for further discussion. Option 4 mentions that, I appreciate that the council is the lead in community planning, so there's an argument for in favour of option 4, but there's also that argument that the board is separate and therefore should have its own internet resources. But option 4, I'm not sure if it's entirely accurate to say that there's no, well, it's somewhat conflicting to say cost. There's no cost other than staff time. That is a cost, I would have argued. And I wondered if there was not an option. I wondered if an option 5 had been considered, which is to host on another partner's website instead of just the council. Had that been considered at any point? Because that might be a solution.
You're right, Councillor Gregg, it should be in there as an option 5, and it has been considered, but was
discounted.
It was indeed only on the basis that at the moment it's the council's corporate team that would be responsible for maintaining that website. So then we would need access to a partner's website. Maybe that is a possibility, but then it would also be then sitting on a partner's website as opposed to ours. But you're right, it should be in there as an option as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. O'Connor, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the cost of the website, most of it is actually the time for these companies to upload and actually migrate everything across is quite time consuming. But WordPress generally, as well as some of the other ones like Webedia and Weebly, they're normally quite reliable. So is it just the size of the information that's on there that's causing problems and making it unstable? Or is it just not simple to upload it? I'm trying to get what the problems really are with the existing platform, and because there is platforms that you can get that's relatively cheap, and we're talking like £400 or £500, and hosting's around about 150. I'm just unsure where the complications are.
Specifically with the plugin updates, it can really knock out the formatting of everything, and we just don't have the knowledge of how to manage those. So we, it's a bit of trial and error, and it's just not ideal that we're doing it. We're kind of trying to run something and it's become unreliable for that reason. But I mean, if you've got knowledge or know of others that might be able to support, we could certainly look into that. But I think, as I said, the way the website is developed by us on our own, it's just looking a bit higgledy-piggledy in places as well. It's not ideal.
I suppose it's try to do your job as well as upload a website is time consuming, and then when problems, who do you then turn to? So I can see the point you're making.
I've got Councillor Radley. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. It's more of a comment than a question. I think there's benefits
from the development of new website, you know, we can get exactly what we need from it and build something that is obviously purpose built. And the maintenance fee is lesser, although the upfront cost is higher. Personally, option one is my preference, but if option one's not an option, I would go for option four. With it migrating over to the council, I think that just streamlines the whole process. I'm aware that there's budget restrictions on all of us, so that's something that can be taken offline. But that would be my preference, option one in the first instance. But if that's not possible due to budgetary restrictions, option four I think would probably be the best from my view.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Mr. Robertson.
Thanks, Chair. This is to help my ignorance. The table at 2.1 talks about the funding partners, I think, which I'm taking means that the members of the Community Planning Board are not the partners.
Sorry.
Yay. So I think as Michelle pointed out, not everybody pays. So you're all partners, but not everybody pays. So there's only a limited number of people who actually make a financial contribution. So that's the difference.
Yes, please.
Hi, Susan Nelson from Nescol. I understand this was also discussed at the management group in March. So the feedback I got was there was a request around funding and organisations have hopefully all responded to that. But I also understand that the colleges and the universities also did offer student placements to support any uploading and data management in the initial stages that might well help as a project.
I think regardless of what option we go for, that will be very welcome and have responded on that basis. But I think we still need to choose an option.
Alistair, do you want to come back in?
I'm sorry. It's as somebody on behalf of an organisation doesn't contribute, I don't feel I can vote to ask other organisations to put more money in. So I'm not really sure about what the process really should be. So apologies.
What I was going to suggest is it was that if we can decide our first preference, as it were, and you know that whether that be option 1, 2, 3, or 4, and if we perhaps say what the second preference would be, we can then go offline and we can actually find out if anybody has any money left in their budgets, because obviously we've just gone through, for the council, for example, we've just gone through the budget process. We have probably allocated money. We have a question mark in and around this £4,000 that I think, or just shy of £4,000, that I think we need to answer, because that would go some way to providing an answer. And we can perhaps come to a decision offline, as it were. We can go round everybody and make sure everybody's copied into any correspondence on this, so that we know where everybody actually stands. But, you know, are we trying to, I think in the first instance, are we trying to achieve the gold standard, the silver, the bronze, or the no cost? And if we can maybe pick preference, second preference, and then take this offline and see what we can do with the funding part. And it may be that that funding part dictates the answer to us. I don't know. But I think it's difficult for us sitting here today to say, you know, if I was to put on my finance hat and say, oh, Aberdeen City Council will pay £12,000, I think Miss Scott will take me outside and have words with me, to say the least. So, you know, I think if we go initially for our preference and a second preference, and if we then go offline and try in the next wee while to try and sort something out, is that acceptable to everyone? I know it's not giving us a final answer today, but it's taking us perhaps in a direction that will give us an answer to everybody. Do you want to come in, Vice Chair? Thanks.
Well, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm going to be. Money's tight, and you know, I take on Councillor Radley's point as well. Whilst the option one's aspirational, what we'd all want, the situation as we do, and to coin one Chief Constable's phrase, hard choices that need to be made, and it seems pragmatic. If there's an option there, it is zero, but we'll still have the same functionality that we're saying we know loss of service, and whilst the principle being have our own website would be good, we do need to make hard choices, and we do need to manage our funds responsibly as well. You know, what would the citizens of Aberdeen think if we were spending £12,000 on a website, when in actual fact we could do it for nothing and provide the same information, but it was just hosted differently. So I do think the optics of it are really important as well. And you know, ultimately, I don't know how much engagement there is with the website first, and you know, if that's possible to gauge, and whether actually even that information's, you know, useful. I think the fact that if we've got an option that is an option, and because it must be viable before it's presented as an option, that it's just staring us in the face, and you know, further conversation and dialogue is going to take us to the same point of zero is the better option. Just Mike Tuppinsworth.
Mr. O'Connor.
Thanks, Chair. Mrs. Scott, Angela, has come up with a suggestion, and I can only ask. ACFO has its own website and a comms officer that does all the IT. I can ask and see if there's capacity there, what it would involve. If there's any cost, there's a capacity on the actual platform there to host the site. And so it's a worth an ask anyway. I don't know what the answer will be, but I can get back to you.
Okay, then can we maybe change my suggestion slightly, that we just take it offline full stop? We don't make a decision today on which preferred option, but that we can, if necessary, do a round robin to gain everybody's agreement on an option at a future time. And I'm taking on board what Mr. Robertson was saying about, you know, having concerns that, you know, financial contributions and things, because I think this is quite important that we actually have a reliable base that people can actually go into, and at present it doesn't seem to be the most reliable system to get in and out of. Sorry, Councillor MacDonald, I think you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good shout. I had thought for the other one was Shmoo. I had thought about was somebody worth speaking to see, you know, what's available and what's out there.
We could schmooze, Shmoo. Take it offline, and perhaps Mr. O'Connor can come back to everybody through Michelle, and we can take it forward from there. Could we agree the recommendations with that qualification?
Chair, I just think it's important that we sit independently. I really do. I think that, and I understand the costs and the budgets restraints and so on, but if that can be possible, I think we should work towards that.
I completely agree, and I think it will give us an opportunity to find out a bit more about this money that's been sitting there unspent as well, because it may help provide a direction to an answer. I don't know. Yeah, okay. If I think we've got there and agreed. So we'll agree the recommendations with that. Have you got that all sorted in your head, what we've done? Okay. Thank you for that. That then takes us to 4.2, the Fairer Aberdeen Fund Annual Report. Susan, I realise Susan Toms is due to leave at 4:45. So can you give us a very brief run through of the paper? Oh, she's already left, I'm told, sorry. Do we have anybody to take us through for questions? Okay. I'm told that she'll take any questions if you want to put them in online, and we'll do it that way, if that's okay with the board. Not seeing anybody disagreeing. In that case, that's the last item of business. The next date of our meeting is the 28th of June, and hopefully we will see you all long before that at various events that are planned. Sorry, Mr. Robertson, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I just want to say I think the impact of the fund is worth recording rather than just pass on to questions, given the number of organisations and individuals that have been supported by it. I think we're remiss to miss that.
No, quite agree. Quite agree. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.